I'm Steve Green, and welcome to Trifecta Platinum and these two fine gentlemen, Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. The series is available to PJTV members and also for purchase by non-members at the PJ Store. Prices are reasonable and your satisfaction is guaranteed. If you aren't 100% satisfied with this segment, I personally will send Bill and Scott down to detail your car. In each Trifecta Platinum series, we'll devote 6 full episodes to a single topic which looks past the headlines to the issues you'll care enough about to want to watch again and again. Today's series is called Los Estados Unidos, where we look at the future of immigration from just about every angle. In my other segment, we looked at the view from the other side of the Rio Grande, and in this one, I'd like to have us talk about some common sense reform other than building a fence or visa reforms or any of the usual talking points you get on immigration. Bill, I want to start with you because, of course, one of these stories we're going to talk about comes from California, where you live. This summer, a bill from State Senator Richard Lara began moving through the state assembly, which would open up California's Obamacare exchange to undocumented migrants, as we're supposed to call them now. But before you go ballistic, I want you to think about this. The bill would not allow them to receive subsidy payments, so they'd have to pay full price for health insurance, and getting even some of California's 2.5 million illegals would help keep your state exchange solvent, which is not the direction it's moving in currently. Now, is that a win-win for California, or do you think maybe it's something else?
Well, let's put aside whether or not I want the California exchange for socialized Obamacare to succeed in the first place aside just for a minute, and let's return to the issue at hand here. We have a number of segments in this immigration issue. I've got one on the wall, and one of the things I talk about on the wall is the issue of guest workers. So, to the degree that there's a plan to get they're not undocumented migrants, they're illegal aliens. Let's just not mess around with linguistics and call them what they are. They're illegal aliens. They're illegally here in this country. That's what they are. Now, because they're here illegally, that means they have to hide in the shadows. It doesn't do them any good to hide in the shadows, and it doesn't do us any good to hide in the shadows. So anything that brings these people out into the protection of the law is good for them, and it's good for us. Anything that legitimizes them to the degree where it makes them legal in this country is good for us. I don't know that you can start passing around the hat for giving health care benefits to people who aren't citizens without having some sort of guest workers program. A guest worker program would track everybody that comes into the country and would allow us to keep an eye on who's here. They would be able to have limited access to things the way that guest workers in other countries do. And then I think we can have this conversation about health care benefits. Until then, however, it just looks to me like it is yet another gigantic lasso of people who are going to be paid for by those of us who are still working and paying taxes in this country. And I think the American people have a perfect right to say, Steve, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I'm already paying for enough people who aren't working, and I don't think so. Now, let me just say before everybody jumps all over this, that the Mexicans that I've known in this country are the hardest working people in the country. Nobody works harder than they do. They work like animals. It's incredible, the level of work, dedication. They send all of their money back home to their families. They're not going out and partying on this money. You know, they're hot bunking 3 or 4 in a bed, and they're working like animals. There has to be a solution to this, and the solution has to come from the law. The law has to reign. If the law reigns, then these immigrants are no longer illegal immigrants. Now they're guest workers. And now we can talk about things like guest worker driver's licenses and guest worker health care. And we can talk about things like the police being able to respond when they get in trouble. These people can't even call the police if they're assaulted because they're here illegally. It's the illegality that's got to change before anything else can change.
You know, let's go to Texas now, where Scott makes his home. Also this summer, the Obama White House gave honors to 9 school teachers, all of whom happen to be illegal immigrants, and 4 of them from Texas. One of those teachers was Luis Juarez Trevino, who qualified for a sort of overage dreamer status, and was honored for his work to empower and encourage his students. Scott, Trevino came here with his parents illegally when he was a boy, but now he teaches math and science to 5th graders not far from you in Dallas. Shouldn't people like him have a path to citizenship, or are we creating perverse incentives for others?
Well, you know, I'm really torn on this whole issue, basically because you start from a presupposition that there's some legitimacy to the existing system. And then my natural inclination as a person who favors equal justice and law is to say, well, you should obey the law. But at what point do you say, you know what? The law, the federal bureaucracy, the system is so screwed up. Why would people risk their lives to avoid dealing with it unless they're criminals? And the vast majority of them are not criminals. I've seen figures that it's somewhere around 10% coming in are actually criminals, which is probably a better average than we have of native-born people in this country. So, you know, when you start with that foundation and say, okay, well, now should we demand that they go back to their home country because they broke the law? Or maybe we should look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what is so screwed up about our system that the very hardworking kind of people, the smart people who will go through college and learn to be teachers and win awards, those kind of people, we want to make it tough for them to come here and to stay here. I think we need to start looking at foundational principles.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah. Yeah, please, Bill, do.
I just have to say two things. First of all, it's the Obama administration celebrating the lawlessness of it. They're going to beat into the heads of the American people what's right for them and smart and good for them, whether we like it or not. So let's just start there. But people act as if there's no solution to this problem. They act as it's absolutely intractable. It's like trying to go to the nearest galaxy. There's just no way to do it. The solution to this kind of thing is very, very simple. I'm not in favor of this guy being sent back to a country he never lived in. If he came as a child of illegal immigrants and grew up here, I'm not saying we need to throw him out, but I am saying there is a solution. The solution is very simple. He can now start the process for U.S. citizenship. He doesn't get in front of anybody who's already in line, but he gets a place in line. Maybe it'll take 7 years, maybe it'll take 10 years. He's not cut in front of people that are doing the right thing and have been doing the right thing. That wouldn't be fair to them. But he continues on the path of citizenship, and he takes the test, and he takes the oath, and he does all of these things, and then he becomes a U.S. citizen, and the point is completely moot. Now, if he doesn't want to become a U.S. citizen, then he can go back to the country which he wants to be a part of. But this path to citizenship is not so hard to figure out. They don't get blanket amnesty. They don't suddenly get a magic wand waved and now you're a citizen when people have been waiting 10 years to come to this country. Take a number, get in line, go through the process, and it's all over.
Now, Steve,
Yeah,
I hate to jump in on you again, but I would only add to that if people have to wait in line because our federal bureaucracy is so screwed up that there's a stack of papers on the desk of every immigration official.
10 years,
That's a problem. The only reason why they should ever have to wait in line is because we decided by law that it would be appropriate for somebody to have a 10-year waiting period before they became citizens to make sure they were really committed. I don't think that's necessary. But if people have to get in a long line simply because of the bureaucratic mismanagement of the federal government, that's a problem.
Yeah, if you can't watch the border, the least you can do is process these things in a speedy and timely manner. Bill, to change pace here for a second, the fact is that immigrants, even illegal ones, have higher rates of entrepreneurship than native-born Americans. But some worry, and sometimes I'm one of those worriers, that our low-growth economy and the acceleration of the welfare state during the Obama administration means we're attracting perhaps the wrong kind of immigrant. We're not getting all those entrepreneurs that. Instead of the makers and shakers, we're getting more of the takers. So what domestic policy or maybe policies would you change to fix that, to get us back to where we should be?
Well, as I said a moment ago, one of these segments I'm doing on the wall, the other one is on a nation of immigrants. And in the nation of immigrants, I argue about some of the high-profile, extremely successful people like, Werner von Braun and Enrico Fermi and Albert Einstein, who became American citizens through immigration. And I want to know why it is that we have a moral obligation to take every one of the poor, huddling masses from wretched, teeming shores. But somehow people that work hard, that have started a business, that have saved, that have gotten an education, people who've scrimped and saved and shown discipline, lawfulness, courage, sacrifice, these people are disqualified from coming to America somehow? The reason is pretty simple, as we'll talk about in that episode. Simpler than you may think. But look, I think that's exactly it, Steve, right? It's like, if you have a plan for a business, we want you here. When we have all of these students who are getting engineering degrees and then going back to China or Germany or whatever, I don't want them. I'm not saying don't let them come and study here. I'm not saying don't let Chinese students come and study here. I'm saying when they're finished with their engineering degrees, why don't we do what we've always done and turn them into Americans? What an amazing idea that would be, huh? Why not just turn them into Americans? You know, we went to the moon because of American know-how and ingenuity, and we went to the moon because of American know-how and ingenuity through the ingenuity and know-how of Americans like Wernher von Braun. That's the kind of American ingenuity we need. So by all means, let's find out where these entrepreneurs are and let's get them to the front of the line. You know, we have TSA pre-check, right? Which I happen to have, and it's a wonderful thing. We had a TSA pre-check. We had to economically pre-check people that have a plan, that have an education and a little business sense, because for every one of those people that we let into the country, it's not a question of race. I don't care where they're from. I don't care what they look like. If we let an entrepreneur into this country ahead of the line, he's going to start a business that's going to generate 5 jobs, 10 jobs, 20 jobs, 100 jobs, 100,000 jobs for all the other immigrants that want to come to America and succeed as well.
And we'd be skimming the cream off the top of every other country in the world. Talk about an amazing competitive advantage.
Imagine.
You know, we've talked about the fair. We've talked about the fair tax on this show before, but I'll give you a quick refresher. The fair tax would completely replace the income tax with a 23% sales tax collected on all first-time retail purchases. But everybody in the country would receive a prebate check each month to cover the fair tax up to the poverty spending line. In other words, the effective tax rate starts at 0 and rises to nearly 23%, based entirely on your own spending, with no need to report your income or anything else to Washington. Businesses would collect the tax at the register just like they do for state and local sales taxes. Everybody pays the same. Everybody gets the same prebate check. Well, everybody gets a check who is here legally. Scott, could the fair tax have the unintended consequence of discouraging illegal immigration?
Well, and I prefer to think of it as encouraging legal immigration and citizenship. I think more people would want to be part of that kind of a system. And frankly, the rest of us would be very excited as well because, you know, as far as we're concerned, President Obama, it's none of your darn business how much money I make. And so I think that would do a lot of wonderful things to the economy. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea. What is a marvel to me, as a matter of fact, is how many illegal immigrants still find a way to legally pay taxes in this country. There are people who are actually here in violation of our immigration laws, but have managed to find a way to pay income taxes. And, you know, those people, for as weird as this is, I think deserve a pat on the back. But transforming the tax code obviously would have a lot of salutary effects throughout the economy, in addition to immigration.
Yeah, and the stories you tell about illegal immigrants paying taxes, that's the kind of good news story that tends to get lost in all the doom and gloom reports we hear. Folks, there was a report from Breitbart this summer that as of 2014, the United States was host to 11.3 million illegal aliens. That's more than the number of unemployed in this country. Now, let's say you could snap your fingers and erect a border fence a mile straight up, one that nobody could ever get across. We would still have those 11.3 million illegals. But the problem isn't the sheer number of illegals, or at least maybe it wouldn't be if our economy were better. The truth is, this is a big country with plenty of room to accommodate a lot more Americans. But they have to become Americans. Now, Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, King of Castile, Aragon, Sicily, and Naples, Archduke of Austria, Duke of Burgundy, Count of Holland, general man about Europe, he once said, "I speak Spanish to God, Italian to women, French to men, and German to my horse." Each language with a purpose. Now, for hundreds of years, English has been the language of law, of rights, of liberties. Robert Heinlein said that language isn't just the words, the vocabulary, and the grammar we use. A language, he said, contains within it a set of assumptions, a map for seeing the world. It doesn't matter where you came from or what the color of your skin is, but if you want to make your way across the land of liberty, you must speak the language of liberty. That language is English. Let's make it official. For Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, I'm Steve Green. Thanks for being a Trifecta Platinum viewer.